It's our stories. Welcome to a world where real stories sounds like a movie script.
Every office has one. The person who smiles to your face over morning coffee, and an hour later writes a detailed report to the boss that you were 3 minutes late. She destroyed careers for sport, feeling like the boss's invincible favorite. But she made one mistake. She decided that I was just like the rest and wouldn't fight back. This is the story of how I spun a web for her out of her own lies and made her run away without looking back. I learned very early in my career that the most dangerous thing in an office isn't an incompetent boss or a crashing market. It's a smile. Specifically, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. The kind that bares teeth just a little too much, like a dog guarding a bone. Elena had that smile. Our office wasn't a wolf pit, it was a snake pit. We worked in high-end logistics, a boring industry on the surface, but underneath, it was a cauldron of stress, tight deadlines, and money. A lot of money. And where there is money and stress, there is fear. Our boss, Mr. Sterling, was a man who thrived on that fear. He was paranoid, insecure, and believed that loyalty was proven not by hard work, but by how much dirt you could dig up on your neighbor. And Elena? She was his queen bee. His eyes and ears. His office rat. I remember the first time I realized what she was. It was 3 months after I joined. I was in the break room, venting to a colleague, Mike, about a client who had been particularly difficult. Just blowing off steam. Nothing serious. Elena walked in. She poured herself a coffee, gave us that sugary, plastic grin, and said, "Don't let it get to you, sweetie. You're doing great." 2 hours later, I was called into Sterling's office. He sat there, tapping a pen on his desk, staring at me with cold, dead eyes. "I hear you're unhappy with our client portfolio," he said. "I hear you think they are morons?" My blood ran cold. I hadn't used that word. But Mike hadn't snitched. I knew Mike. He was solid. It was Elena. She had taken my frustration, twisted it, embellished it with insults I never spoke, and served it to Sterling on a silver platter. I spent the next hour begging for my job, sweating through my shirt, while Sterling lectured me on gratitude. From that day on, I saw the invisible wires she had strung all over the office. Elena wasn't obvious about it. She wasn't the stereotypical villain twirling a mustache. She was worse. She was the mom of the office. She remembered birthdays. She brought in homemade cookies on Fridays. She asked about your sick mother and your kids' soccer games. She collected information like a hoarder collects newspapers. "How is your wife dealing with the stress?" she'd ask tenderly by the water cooler. And if you slipped, if you said, "Oh, she hates that I work late," that information would be filed away. 2 weeks later, Sterling would say, "I need someone committed to this project, not someone whose wife is nagging them about hours." It was psychological warfare. The air in the office was thick with it. You couldn't trust anyone. Conversations stopped when she entered the room. We developed a sign language of raised eyebrows and subtle nods just to communicate basic frustrations without giving her ammo. But the worst part wasn't the fear. It was the unfairness. While we worked 60-hour weeks to meet quotas, Elena did nothing. Her work was surveillance. She spent her days wandering from cubicle to cubicle, hovering, listening, pretending to check in. She was untouchable. We all knew that Sterling paid her a bonus for every internal risk she identified. She was literally paid to destroy us. I watched her for a year. I watched good people get fired because they trusted her. I watched a young intern leave in tears because Elena found her personal blog and twisted a post about being tired into hating the company. I kept my head down. I became a gray rock. Uninteresting. Dull. Efficient. I gave her nothing. I thought if I stayed invisible, I'd be safe. I was wrong. Predators don't hunt because they are hungry, they hunt because it's their nature. And eventually, she turned her gaze toward the only friend I had left in that hellhole. The breaking point didn't come with a bang. It came with the quiet shuffle of a cardboard box being packed on a rainy Tuesday. Tom was the best of us. He was a guy in his 50s, a veteran of the industry who just wanted to do his job and go home to his dogs. He wasn't ambitious. He wasn't a threat to anyone. He was the guy who fixed the printer when it jammed and covered your shift when you had a dentist appointment. Elena hated him. Not because he did anything to her, but because he was happy. He didn't play her games. When she tried to gossip, he'd just smile and say, "I don't know about that," and go back to work. His indifference drove her mad. Narcissists can't handle indifference. It's an insult to their existence. One afternoon, Tom made a mistake. A small one. He sent an invoice to a client with a typo in the address. The email bounced back. He fixed it, resent it, and the client got it 5 minutes late. No harm, no foul. The client didn't even notice. But Elena noticed. I saw her standing behind him when the bounce-back notification popped up on his screen. She didn't say anything. She just hummed a little tune and walked away. The next morning, Tom wasn't at his desk. His computer was locked. At 10 a.m., Sterling called an emergency all-hands meeting. He stood at the front of the room, face red, veins bulging in his neck. Elena stood next to him, looking somber, her hands clasped in front of her like a grieving widow. "We have had a serious security breach," Sterling announced, his voice booming. "It has come to my attention that some employees are handling sensitive client data with gross negligence. Data was sent to an unsecured, incorrect server. This could have exposed us to millions in liability." The room went silent. We all knew who he was talking about. But millions in liability? It was a typo. "Tom has been let go," Sterling continued. "We have zero tolerance for incompetence. Let this be a lesson to all of you." I looked at Elena. For a split second, her mask slipped. She looked at me, and then at Tom's empty desk, and a tiny, satisfied smirk curled the corner of her lip. It was a look of pure, unadulterated malice. She enjoyed it. She enjoyed the power of taking a man's livelihood over a typo. I found Tom in the parking lot later, holding his box of personal belongings. He looked old. Defeated. "She went into the logs," he told me, his voice shaking. "She accessed the IT logs, printed out the error, and took it to Sterling. She told him I was sending data to a competitor. She lied, Mark. And he believed her." "I know," I said. My hands were balled into fists in my pockets. "I know." "Be careful, kid," Tom said, putting a hand on my shoulder. "She's not done. She needs fresh meat. You're doing well. You're hitting your numbers. That makes you a target." I watched him drive away. The rain was pounding on the asphalt, washing away the traces of the only decent man in the building. Something snapped inside me. It wasn't a hot, fiery rage. It was something colder. It was a mechanical click, like a safety being switched off on a weapon. I went back inside. The office was quiet. People were typing furiously, afraid to look up. Elena was in the break room, laughing loudly on the phone, probably retelling the story of her victory to a friend. I sat at my desk and unlocked my computer. I looked at the reflection of the office in my dark monitor. I saw a prison. And I saw the warden. I realized then that playing defense was a losing strategy. You can't defend against someone who makes up the rules as they go along. You can't hide from a surveillance state. The only way to survive was to go on the offensive. I needed a plan. I needed to do more than just get her fired. If she got fired, she'd just go somewhere else and do the same thing. No. I needed to break her credibility. I needed to turn her greatest weapon, her paranoia and her addiction to information, against her. I looked at the empty desk where Tom used to sit. "Okay, Elena," I whispered to myself. "You want to play spy? Let's play." I opened a blank document. I didn't start working on logistics. I started drafting a script. A script for a play where she would be the star, the villain, and the victim all at once. And she wouldn't even know the curtain had risen until the trapdoor opened beneath her feet. Revenge is not a sprint, it's a marathon run in a minefield. To destroy Elena, I had to understand her addiction. She was an info junkie. She got a dopamine hit every time she uncovered a secret. So, I decided to give her the biggest, juiciest, most irresistible secret she had ever seen. I invented Project Exodus. It didn't exist, obviously. But I made it real in the shadows. I created a folder on my desktop, buried 3 levels deep in a subdirectory named Personal. I encrypted it, but with a password that was laughably easy to crack if you watched my fingers for long enough, 1 2 3 4 5 6. Inside the folder, I planted the seeds of treason. I drafted fake emails to a competitor, emails that looked like I was negotiating a massive salary bump to bring Sterling's top 5 clients with me. I created spreadsheets showing projected revenue loss for Sterling if I left. It was damning. If real, it was corporate espionage of the highest order. It was exactly the kind of thing that would get me fired, sued, and blacklisted forever. But a digital trap wasn't enough. I had to sell the performance. For 2 weeks, I became the worst actor in the world. When Elena walked past my desk, I would quickly minimize my windows, looking guilty and flushed. I started taking private calls in the hallway, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. Yes, I have the client list, I would whisper into a dead phone, knowing she was hovering near the water cooler, straining her ears. No, Sterling suspects nothing. We move next month. I felt her eyes on me constantly. It was visceral. I could feel her excitement building. She was like a shark smelling blood in the water. She wasn't reporting me yet, I knew that. She was greedy. She didn't just want to catch me breaking a rule, she wanted to catch me in the act of destroying the company. She wanted the kill shot that would secure her position as Sterling's savior forever. I played the nervous traitor perfectly. I started staying late, knowing she checked the login logs. I printed documents and then shredded them, but left the strips wide enough to be pieced together if someone was desperate enough. One evening, I left my physical notebook on my desk. Just for 5 minutes while I went to the bathroom. Inside, I had scribbled a list of dates and the word exit strategy underlined 3 times. When I came back, the notebook was moved. Just an inch. The angle was slightly off. I sat down, my heart pounding not with fear, but with a dark, cold thrill. She had taken the bait. She had looked. She had swallowed the hook, line, and sinker. Now, I just had to reel her in. The waiting game is the hardest part. I knew she was building a dossier on me. I knew she was taking screenshots, recording times, probably even digging through my trash. It was time to introduce the second phase, the glitch. I needed to make her doubt her own reality. I needed to make her look unstable before she even opened her mouth. I knew she had access to the shared drive where we stored the legitimate client weekly reports. I knew she reviewed my work every Thursday night before Sterling saw it on Friday. So, on Thursday afternoon, I uploaded a report with a glaring error. I inflated the shipping costs by 200%. It was a mistake that would look like I was trying to embezzle funds or was grossly incompetent. I saw the notification, user Eleno_admin has viewed weekly_logistics_report.xlsx. She had seen it. She had probably saved a copy immediately to show Sterling later. Look, boss, Mark is padding the numbers. 10 minutes later, I deleted the file. I uploaded a new version. The correct version. The clean version. But I manipulated the metadata to make it look like it had been uploaded hours ago, untouched. The next morning, the trap sprang partially. Elena marched over to my desk, holding a printout. She looked triumphant. Mark, can you explain these shipping costs? Sterling isn't going to like this. She slammed the paper down. It showed the inflated numbers. I looked at it, then looked at her with genuine confusion. What are you talking about, Elena? Those numbers are wrong. I know they are wrong, she snapped. That's why I printed it. But, that's not what's on the server, I said calmly. I uploaded the report yesterday. Let's look. I opened the file on my screen. The numbers were perfect. Elena's eyes widened. She looked at her printout, then at the screen. You changed it, she hissed. You changed it just now. Elena, I said, my voice dripping with concern. Look at the timestamp. Last modified, yesterday, 4 p.m. I haven't touched it since. She stared at the screen. I could see the gears grinding in her head. She knew she had seen the error. She had physical proof in her hand. But the digital reality, the truth, said otherwise. You're playing games, she whispered, her face losing some of its color. I think you might be tired, Elena, I said, loud enough for the neighboring cubicles to hear. Maybe you printed an old draft? Or maybe, are you feeling okay? You've been working late a lot. She snatched her printout and stormed off. I repeated this process 3 times over the next week. I would plant a smoking gun, wait for her to see it, and then erase it from existence, replacing it with innocence. By the end of the week, she looked haggard. Her lipstick was slightly smeared. She was double-checking everything, muttering to herself. She was starting to doubt her own senses. Was she seeing things? Was I that good at hiding tracks? Or was she losing her grip? I was turning the surveillance state against the spy. And she was cracking. It happened on a Friday. The tension in the office was electric. Elena had been vibrating with nervous energy all day. She had finally gathered enough evidence from my Project Exodus folder screenshots she had taken when I accidentally left my screen unlocked during lunch. At 2 p.m., I was summoned to Sterling's office. When I walked in, it felt like a trial. Sterling was behind his massive oak desk, looking furious. Elena was sitting in the corner chair, clutching a binder like it was a holy relic. She looked at me with a mix of hatred and pure, terrifying joy. She thought she had one. She thought she was about to watch my execution. "Sit down, Mark," Sterling barked. I sat. I kept my posture relaxed, open. Confused innocence. "Elena has brought some very disturbing allegations to my attention," Sterling began, tossing a stack of papers onto the desk. "She claims you are planning to leave the company. That you are planning to steal our clients. And that you have been negotiating with our competitors." I picked up the papers. They were the fake emails I had drafted. The Project Exodus spreadsheets. I paused, looking at the papers, then started to chuckle. A low, confused laugh. "You think this is funny?" Sterling roared. "Corporate espionage is funny to you?" "No, sir," I said, composing myself. "It's just, this isn't espionage. This is fiction." "Fiction?" Elena screeched. "I saw them on your computer. I saw the folder. Project Exodus. You are stealing the Vance account." I looked at Sterling. "Sir, may I?" He nodded. "Elena," I said gently. "Do you know what date is on these emails?" She blinked. "Last Tuesday." "And do you know what I was doing last Tuesday?" I turned to Sterling. "Sir, last Tuesday was the creative writing workshop the HR department recommended for team building. Remember? You sent out the memo that we should try to expand our creative horizons to write better marketing copy." Sterling frowned. "I remember the memo." "Yes. Well," I continued, "I was practicing. I was writing a scenario. A crisis scenario. I wanted to see how much damage a hypothetical rogue employee could do, so we could build better defenses against it. It's a risk assessment exercise. I called it Project Exodus because, well, it sounds dramatic." "That's a lie," Elena shouted, standing up. "He's lying. He was whispering on the phone. He was meeting people." "I was on the phone with my mother," I said smoothly. "She's in the hospital. I was whispering because I didn't want to disturb the office with my personal problems." I pulled out my phone. I scrolled to the call log. Here. Tuesday. 2 p.m. Mom. Duration, 20 minutes. It was true. I had called my mom. We talked about her cat. But in Elena's paranoid mind, it was a conspiracy. Sterling looked at the call log. Then he looked at the emails. They were over the top. Melodramatic. Now that I had framed them as creative writing, they looked ridiculous. "And the numbers?" Sterling asked, pointing to the spreadsheet. "The revenue loss?" "A stress test, sir," I said. "I wanted to show you next week how vulnerable we are if we lose key accounts. I was working on a solution to retain them, not steal them. Why would I leave this on my desktop if I was actually stealing it? I'm not an idiot." Sterling looked at Elena. The atmosphere in the room shifted. It went from an interrogation of me to an interrogation of her. "Elena," Sterling said, his voice dropping to a dangerous low. "Did you break into Mark's private files?" I was monitoring risks," she stammered. "He left it open. He wanted me to see it." "So you're saying," Sterling said, leaning back, "that Mark is a mastermind spy who leaves his top-secret treason plans open on his screen, or you are snooping through people's personal drafts and wasting my time with theories?" "He's manipulating you," Elena cried, her voice cracking. She looked wild. Desperate. "He changed the shipping logs too. Last week. He's gaslighting me." "The shipping logs?" Sterling asked. "The ones that were perfectly accurate?" "He changed them back." Sterling rubbed his temples. He looked tired. He looked at Elena not as an asset, but as a liability. A hysterical, paranoid liability. "Mark," Sterling said. "Get back to work. Keep working on that risk assessment. I like the initiative." "Thank you, sir," I said. I stood up. I walked to the door. Before I left, I turned and looked at Elena. She was pale, trembling, her mouth open in shock. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just gave her a small, pitying nod. The seed was planted. Sterling now doubted her judgment. But I wasn't done. I had destroyed her credibility. Now, I needed to destroy her sanity. The real game was just beginning. Credibility is like virginity, once you lose it, you can't get it back. Sterling didn't fire Elena after the Project Exodus debacle, but something worse happened. He stopped looking at her. He stopped calling her for morning briefings. He treated her like a piece of furniture that had suddenly become inconvenient. For a narcissist like Elena, being ignored is worse than being beaten. She was starving for attention, for validation. And starvation makes you desperate. It makes you reckless. I decided to accelerate her decline. I called it Operation Poltergeist. It was petty. It was juvenile. And it was devastatingly effective. I started arriving at the office 20 minutes early, before anyone else. I had the janitor's schedule memorized, so I knew exactly when the floor was empty. I would go to Elena's perfectly organized desk and move things. Just slightly. I'd shift her stapler 3 inches to the left. I'd lower her chair height by a fraction of an inch. I'd swap her blue pens for black ones. Subtle changes. Things you notice subconsciously but can't quite articulate. When Elena arrived at 9 a.m., I would watch her from behind my monitor. She would sit down, frown, adjust her chair. She would reach for her stapler, miss, and look at it with a confused expression. She would start writing, stop, look at the pen, and mutter to herself. By Wednesday, she was asking people, "Did you sit at my desk? Who touched my things?" Everyone denied it, because everyone was telling the truth. Except me. And I was the nice guy now. "Maybe the cleaners moved it, Elena," I said helpfully, offering her a sympathetic smile. "You seem really stressed lately. Are you sleeping okay?" She glared at me, but she couldn't prove anything. The seed of madness was taking root. She started locking her stapler in her drawer. She put tape on the floor to mark where her chair should be. She looked unhinged. Simultaneously, I launched the whisper campaign. I didn't spread rumors, I spread concern. "I'm really worried about Elena," I told the HR manager over lunch. "She's been forgetting things. She's shouting at her computer. Do you think she's having a breakdown? I just don't want her to hurt herself." It worked. The office narrative shifted from Elena the spy to Elena the liability. People stopped whispering when she entered the room. Instead, they stopped talking altogether and stared at her with pity and fear. She was completely isolated. Trapped in a glass box of her own making, with the walls slowly closing in. She knew I was doing it. She knew. But every time she tried to complain, she sounded like a lunatic complaining about moving staplers. She needed a win. She needed to prove that I was the villain. She needed a smoking gun. So, I decided to give her one. Fear is a powerful motivator, but hope is the ultimate trap. I needed to give Elena hope. The hope that she could redeem herself. I bought a small, black Moleskine notebook. Expensive leather, thick paper. The kind of notebook a man uses to write down things he doesn't want in the cloud. I spent an evening filling the first 10 pages with gibberish codes, dates, and amounts. To the untrained eye, it looked like a ledger of illegal bribes. City Council, $50,000, November 12th. EPA Inspector, $10,000, cash. I labeled the spine with a piece of white tape. I wrote one word on it in red marker, Sterling. The next day, I brought the notebook to work. I carried it everywhere. I clutched it to my chest when I walked down the hallway. I put it on the table during meetings, keeping my hand on it protectively. When Sterling walked by, I would visibly flinch and cover the notebook. Elena was watching. Her eyes were laser-focused on that black book. She saw my nervousness. She saw the label. Her predator brain connected the dots instantly. Mark has dirt on Sterling. Mark is blackmailing the boss. If she could get that book and bring it to Sterling, she would be the hero. She would prove that I was a snake, and she was the loyal soldier protecting the king. I set the stage on a Thursday. We had a client mixer that evening, a semi-formal event in the office lobby with drinks and hors d'oeuvres. Sterling would be there. Important clients would be there. It was the perfect audience for a dramatic revelation. At 4 p.m., I sat at my desk. Elena was in her cubicle across the aisle, pretending to work but watching me in the reflection of her powered-off monitor. I took the notebook out. I read a page, shook my head nervously, and then placed it in the bottom drawer of my desk. I locked the drawer. Then, I stood up, patted my pockets, and walked toward the break room, leaving my keys accidentally on the corner of my desk. It was the oldest trick in the book. But Elena wasn't thinking clearly. She was desperate. She saw the keys. She saw the drawer. She saw her salvation. I went to the break room and watched the reflection in the glass of the coffee machine. I saw her stand up. I saw her look around. The office was buzzing with activity, people getting ready for the mixer. No one was looking at her. She moved fast. She swiped the keys. She unlocked the drawer. She grabbed the black notebook. She relocked the drawer and put the keys back. She slid the notebook into her purse, her hands trembling. She had it. I smiled into my coffee cup. She thought she was holding a grenade that would blow me up. She didn't realize she had just pulled the pin on her own suicide vest. The mixer was in full swing by 6 p.m. The air smelled of expensive cologne and cheap catering. Sterling was holding court in the center of the room, laughing loudly with the CEO of our biggest logistics partner. He looked relaxed, powerful. I stood by the shrimp cocktail tower, sipping sparkling water. I looked calm, but my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. This was it. Elena was circling the perimeter. She was wearing a red dress, aggressive, bold. She looked like she was ready to kill. She kept touching her purse, checking the weight of the notebook inside. She was waiting for the perfect moment. At 6:30 p.m., Sterling clinked a spoon against his champagne glass. The room went silent. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sterling began, his voice booming. "Thank you all for coming. This year has been challenging, but we have overcome." He started his speech. It was the usual corporate fluff. Suddenly, Elena stepped forward. She pushed through the crowd, marching right into the center of the circle, interrupting Sterling mid-sentence. "Excuse me, sir," she shouted. Her voice was shrill, echoing off the marble floors. Sterling stopped. He looked annoyed. "Elena? We are in the middle of a speech." "I have to stop you, sir," she said, breathing heavily. She looked manic. Her eyes were wide, her face flushed. "You are in danger. There is a traitor in this room." The room gasped. The clients looked uncomfortable. Sterling's face turned purple. "Elena, go to my office. Now." "No," she screamed. She reached into her purse and pulled out the black notebook. She held it up like Moses holding the commandments. "Mark is blackmailing you. He has been keeping records of your illegal activities. He wrote your name on it. Look." She pointed a shaking finger at me. "He's been hiding this. He's going to destroy the company." All eyes turned to me. I put on my best confused deer-in-headlights expression. "Elena, what are you talking about?" I asked softly. "That's my personal journal." "Liar," she shrieked. She turned to Sterling and shoved the notebook into his hands. "Read it. It's all there. The bribes. The payoffs. He wrote it all down." Sterling looked at the notebook. He looked at the label that said Sterling. He looked at the terrified clients. He had no choice. He opened it. The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the break room. Sterling flipped the first page. Then the second. Then the third. His expression changed. It went from anger to confusion, and then to a deep, cold fury. But not at me. He turned the notebook around and showed it to the room. It wasn't the ledger I had scribbled in the day before. It was a sketchbook. And on every single page, drawn in crude, angry charcoal, were caricatures of Sterling. But they weren't just drawings. They were demonic. Sterling with horns. Sterling eating money. Sterling as a pig. And scrawled over the drawings in frantic handwriting were phrases like, "The tyrant, fat pig, I hope he chokes, die, die, die." Elena froze. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. I had swapped the notebooks. While she was in the bathroom 5 minutes before the theft, I had switched the bribe ledger in the drawer for this masterpiece. A sketchbook I had spent 3 nights working on, mimicking a deranged style. "This," Elena stammered. "This isn't, he switched it. He switched it." "You broke into my desk," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. "You stole my private therapy journal. My therapist told me to draw my frustrations to deal with a hostile work environment. I keep that locked away because it's personal." "And you stole it and showed it to the entire client board?" "No," she screamed, looking around wildly. "He had a ledger. Illegal bribes." "Elena," Sterling said. His voice was terrifyingly quiet. "You interrupted a client meeting. You accused an employee of blackmail. And you presented this as evidence? Drawings of me as a pig?" "He drew them," she cried. "He hates you." "It doesn't matter who drew them," Sterling hissed. "You stole personal property. You violated privacy. And you humiliated this firm in front of our partners." Sterling looked at the security guards standing by the door. He nodded. "Get her out of here." The guards moved in. Elena tried to back away, knocking over a tray of champagne glasses. Smash. The sound was the final period on her career. "You're blind," she screamed as they grabbed her arms. "He played you. He's the devil. Mark is the devil." She was kicking and screaming as they dragged her across the lobby. Everyone watched. The clients, the colleagues, the competitors. I stood there, looking at the broken glass on the floor. Sterling turned to the crowd, smoothing his tie. "My apologies, everyone. Clearly, we have some mental health issues to address within our staff. Please, enjoy the food." He walked over to me. He handed me the sketchbook. He didn't look at the drawings. He just looked at me. There was a flicker of fear in his eyes. He knew. Deep down, he knew I had orchestrated this. But he couldn't prove it. And frankly, he was just glad the crazy woman was gone. "Burn that," he muttered. "Yes, sir," I said. I watched the revolving doors spin as Elena was thrown out onto the street. She was gone. The queen bee was dead. I took a sip of my water. It tasted sweet. But the war wasn't over. A power vacuum had opened up. And I knew exactly who was going to fill it. Monday morning felt like walking into a morgue. Elena's desk was empty. Not just cleared off, but sanitized. The IT department had already stripped the hardware. The chair was gone. It was a void in the middle of the open plan office, a black hole that everyone walked around but no one looked at. The silence was different now. Before, it was the silence of prey hiding from a predator. Now, it was the silence of survivors wandering through a blast zone, unsure if the radiation would still kill them. They looked at me differently. Before, I was Mark from logistics, the quiet guy who hated the coffee machine. Now, I was the guy who had publicly decapitated the queen bee. They didn't know how I did it. Sterling had hushed up the details of the blackmail, but they knew I was the one standing when the dust settled. I saw fear in their eyes. Genuine, visceral fear. And God help me, I liked it. At 11 a.m., Sterling summoned me. The walk to his office used to feel like a death march. Now, it felt like a coronation. I walked in without knocking. Sterling was staring out the window, nursing a glass of water. He looked older. The incident at the mixer had rattled him. He turned to me, his eyes evaluating me with a cold, new respect. "She's gone," he said simply. "Lawyers are handling the NDA. We paid her 3 months severance to keep her mouth shut about the hostile work environment. Money well spent," I replied, sitting down uninvited. "We have a problem, Mark," Sterling said, sitting on the edge of his desk. Elena was difficult. Unstable. But she was effective. She kept the wheels greased. She knew where the bodies were buried. With her gone, I have a blind spot. I don't like blind spots. He looked at me pointedly. The subtext was louder than a scream. He didn't want a logistics manager. He wanted a new watchdog. "I can handle the oversight," I said. My voice was steady. But not from a cubicle. And not for a manager's salary. Sterling smiled. It was the smile of a man who recognizes his own kind. Director of Operations, he proposed. Corner office. 20% raise. And direct reporting line to me. No intermediaries. Done. I moved into my new office that afternoon. It was Elena's old office, glass-walled, soundproofed. The Panopticon. From here, I could see everyone. I spent the first day going through the legacy files on her secure drive access Sterling had granted me. What I found was breathtaking. She hadn't just been watching us, she had been cataloging us. Folders on everyone. Mike, gambling debt. Sarah, affairs. David, alcohol problem. And then I found my folder. Mark. I opened it. It was thick. Photos of me leaving the office late. Logs of my internet history. Transcripts of my conversations with Tom. She had known about my resentment for months. She had just been waiting for the right moment to crush me. I hovered my mouse over the delete button. I could wipe it all. I could free the office. I could be the liberator. I looked through the glass wall. I saw Mike laughing at a joke. I saw the new intern texting on her phone instead of working. I saw the inefficiency. The weakness. If I deleted these files, I would be blind. Just like Sterling said. I didn't press delete. I pressed copy. I transferred the entire archive to my private encrypted drive. That afternoon, Mike came into my office. He was smiling, relaxed. Hey, Mr. Director. Congrats on the bump. Listen, with Elena gone, I was thinking of taking a long lunch on Friday. You know, to celebrate. Maybe we can all grab drinks? He thought we were friends. He thought the war was over. I looked at him. I looked at the file open on my screen, the one detailing his poker debts. Mike, I said, my voice devoid of warmth. We are down 4% in Q3. I don't think we have time for long lunches. In fact, I need you to audit the shipping logs from the last 6 months. By Monday. His smile vanished. But, Mark, that's a two-man job. It's the weekend. Then you better get started, I said, turning back to my screen. He stood there for a moment, stunned. Then he turned and walked out, his shoulders slumped. I watched him go. I felt a twinge of guilt, faint and distant, like a memory of a pain I used to have. But then I looked at the quarterly projections. Efficiency was up. I wasn't Elena. I told myself that. Elena enjoyed the cruelty. I was just doing what was necessary. I was the surgeon cutting out the rot. But as I sat there, bathed in the blue light of the monitor, I realized the terrifying truth. The surgeon and the butcher used the same knife. 6 months later. The city looked different from the 40th floor. Cleaner. Smaller. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of my office, adjusting the cuffs of my bespoke Italian suit. It cost more than my first car. The office was silent behind me. Not the fearful silence of before, but the disciplined silence of a machine running at peak performance. Sterling had effectively retired to his golf estate in Florida. He still held the title of CEO, but everyone knew who ran the company. He called me once a week to check the numbers. As long as the graph went up, he didn't care how many bodies I had to step over. And the graph always went up. I was ruthless. I fired the bottom 10% of the staff every quarter. I installed keyloggers on every workstation for security purposes. I created a bonus structure that pitted employees against each other, turning the office into a gladiatorial arena where only the most vicious survived. I had built a masterpiece of efficiency. And it was built on a foundation of absolute terror. It was snowing that evening. I decided to walk home. My driver was waiting, but I needed the cold air to clear my head after firing the HR director for excessive empathy. I walked past a discount department store a few blocks from the office. The kind of place with fluorescent lights that buzz and piles of cheap clothing thrown into bins. I don't know why I looked inside. Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was a subconscious desire to gloat. I saw her. Elena. She was wearing a blue vest, folding a pile of generic t-shirts. Her hair, once perfectly dyed and styled, was pulled back in a messy bun, showing gray roots. She looked tired. Her face was puffy, her eyes dull. She was arguing with a customer about a coupon. "I'm sorry, ma'am, it expired yesterday," she was saying, her voice cracking. "Well, call your manager," the customer screamed. Elena flinched. The woman who used to make grown men cry in boardrooms was now cowering before a suburban mom with a bad haircut. I stood there on the sidewalk, watching her through the glass. I expected to feel pity. Or maybe anger. Or even a sense of justice. I felt nothing. She was just a bug that had been crushed. Irrelevant. She looked up. For a second, our eyes met through the glass and the falling snow. I saw recognition flash in her eyes. Then shame. Then fear. She looked down quickly, furiously folding a shirt, hiding her face. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I just turned up the collar of my coat and kept walking. She belonged to the past. I was the future. The next morning, I arrived at the office at 8 a.m. sharp. There was a new hire waiting in the lobby. A young kid, fresh out of college. Bright eyes, cheap suit, eager smile. He reminded me of someone. He reminded me of Mark. The old Mark. "Good morning, sir," he chirped as I swiped my badge. "I'm David. The new junior analyst. I'm really excited to learn from you." I stopped. I looked him up and down. I saw the hunger. I saw the naivety. I saw the potential threat. I didn't shake his hand. I gave him a smile. That smile. The one that doesn't reach the eyes. The one that bares teeth just a little too much. "Welcome to the team, David," I said softly. "Don't get too comfortable. We have high standards here." I walked past him, leaving him unsettled in the lobby. I entered my office and sat in the leather chair that had once been the throne of my enemy. I opened the laptop. I brought up the surveillance feed of the bullpup. I watched David sit at his new desk, looking around nervously. I opened a new file on my computer. File name, David_analyst.docs. I started typing. Observation day 1, subject is eager but lacks situational awareness. Potential emotional vulnerability, seeking approval. Keep under close watch. The cycle wasn't broken. It was perfected. The office needs a monster to keep the lights on. It needs a rat to eat the garbage. Elena was an amateur. She did it for fun. I do it for business. I am the necessary evil. And business is booming.
Thank you for staying with me until the end. How would you have acted in the protagonist's place? Write your thoughts in the comments. More fresh and controversial stories every day on my profile. Like and subscribe to this channel.